Where do you think is the safest place? Your own home, a familiar street, or maybe those peaceful evening walks with your pet? In this video, you'll hear 3 true stories where what seemed like harmless routines turned into nightmares with no way out. 3 people, 3 separate paths, but all with one terrifying similarity. The thing lurking in the dark isn't always just your imagination. Story 1. The Man Behind the Tree. It was a damp, overcast Saturday afternoon when I decided to take Hemi, my loyal pit bull, for a long walk through a nature reserve in town. I always chose the lesser-known trails. It gave us a bit of variety, and Hemi loved discovering new scents. The path that day was narrow and winding, surrounded on both sides by dense woods. The only sounds were crickets and the crunch of dry leaves underfoot. There was a stillness in the air, not peaceful exactly, more like the silence right before something wrong. About 30 minutes in, we passed a small, nearly abandoned park, a rusted swing swaying gently in the wind, and a basketball court with no backboard. I planned to rest on a wooden bench facing the playground, but the moment I sat down, Hemi began to growl, that deep, warning growl he only used when he sensed a threat. I stood up instinctively and loosened his leash. He pulled me toward the edge of the woods where the light was beginning to fade. I didn't see anything at first, until a man suddenly stepped out from behind a large tree. He wore a dark hoodie, his face hidden beneath the hood and shadows. He chuckled and said, "Whoa, you found me." I froze. The way he appeared, it was off. I pulled Hemi close, muttered a quick apology, and turned to leave. But a few steps in, I heard the crunching of leaves behind me. I looked back. He was following. "Just want to pet your dog, don't worry," he said, grinning in a crooked, unsettling way. "Sorry, he doesn't like strangers." "I really need to go," I replied, picking up my pace. Hemi kept turning his head, whining. Every time I glanced back, the man was there, keeping just enough distance not to alarm me, but never taking his eyes off us. Then I ran. Me and Hemi tore down the trail through brush and uneven ground until we saw the glow of streetlights ahead. We were back in the neighborhood. At home, I locked the door, pulled the curtains, and let out a shaky breath. I thought it was over. But at 1 a.m., as light rain started to fall, Hemi suddenly lifted his head. He growled, eyes fixed on the window. Before I could even get out of bed, a deep, raspy voice came from just outside the glass. "Did you see what I was doing in the woods?" I spun around. Through the thin curtain, I saw the silhouette of a man standing completely still. I shouted, "What do you want?" He replied in a chilling whisper, "Are you sure you didn't see anything?" My voice cracked as I trembled and yelled, "No, I didn't." And then he vanished. I locked every window, called the police. The dispatcher said they'd send a patrol car if he returned. But what kept me awake that night wasn't fear. It was the question, did I see what he was doing? And more importantly, what had he done that he was so desperate to make sure no one ever found out? Story 2. The Girl in the Abandoned House. It was a summer night in 2010, and I was out walking my dog Poppy like I did most evenings. My neighborhood was pretty peaceful, but that night I decided to take a different route. One that passed by the old abandoned house everyone in town called the Murder House. Legend had it, a young girl was murdered inside that very house by her boyfriend, who vanished afterward without a trace. No one dared to buy the place, and it sat there ever since, silent, forgotten, like a dark memory buried in the middle of the neighborhood. As we approached the rusty iron gate, Poppy suddenly stopped. She began to growl, ears perked, eyes locked on the partially open ground floor window. I had never seen her react like that before. My heart was pounding, but curiosity pulled me forward. We stepped onto the overgrown lawn. The house sat in complete darkness, tucked between two streetlights as if swallowed by shadow. When I stepped onto the creaking wooden porch, Poppy whimpered. Her paws twitched like she wanted to back away. I knelt to calm her down, then leaned in close to the window and was surprised to see that it was actually open. Inside was nothing but empty walls and a dark hallway leading to the back of the house. I could barely see anything through the thick darkness, until I heard a noise like something heavy falling onto the wooden floor somewhere deep in the back. My heart was racing. I took a few steps back, but then curiosity won again. I led Poppy around the side of the house, thinking maybe I could get a better look through the back windows. But what caught my attention was the old shed in the far corner of the yard. Its door was slightly ajar, revealing a narrow sliver of darkness. I don't know why, but I walked toward it, gently tugging Poppy along. She didn't resist, but her steps were slow, hesitant. I got close, reached for the door, and peeked inside. And that's when I froze. Standing in the middle of the empty shed was a girl, thin. Her long hair draped over her face, arms limp at her sides like she had no energy left. She didn't speak, didn't move. She just stood there. Poppy screamed a wild, frantic bark I'd never heard from her before. She yanked hard on the leash, not to charge at the figure, but to get away, to escape. I could only stare for one more second. Then I ran too. We sprinted out of that yard across 2 streets until I couldn't breathe. Back home, I sat in my room trying to process what I had just seen. Was it a real person? A ghost? A memory? That figure? That presence? The way she stood there, lifeless. A young girl. In the same house where a young girl had once been murdered. And if that wasn't a ghost, then what kind of person just stands motionless, alone in an empty shed in the middle of the night? Story 3. The Man with the Dog Supplies. I was just 10 years old at the time, right in the middle of a scorching summer, when my parents finally let us get our first dog, a golden retriever puppy named Nyla. It was my job to walk her every evening. That night started like any other, until Nyla suddenly stopped and began wagging her tail, looking across the street. There was a middle-aged man walking a small white dog, shy-looking, timid. We started talking. He seemed friendly, easy to talk to, and very fond of Nyla. We chatted for a while. He told me his own Golden had recently passed away, and he still had lots of supplies, toys, collars, even food, and wanted to give them to me. As a 10-year-old, I thought, wow, lucky me. So I followed him back to his place just around the block. The house was small and a bit old, but didn't seem too bad. He let his little dog run into a dark room at the back, then invited me and Nyla into the kitchen. I sat on a tall chair next to the island. He smiled and handed me a bag of potato chips, a brand I'd never seen before. I didn't open it. He sat close beside me, petting Nyla, his eyes fixed strangely on the bag of chips. That's when I started to feel uneasy. There were no dog supplies, no leash, no collar, just dim yellow lighting. And the man asking weird personal questions. What grade are you in? Do you stay home alone often? Do your parents work late? I hesitated, then asked, "You said you had stuff for dogs." He smiled. Yeah. I'll go grab it from the basement." He walked out of the kitchen through a small wooden door and disappeared down a staircase. A few seconds later, he called up, "Hey, come down here. I found a collar I think will fit Nyla perfectly." I walked toward the stairs. My hand was already on the doorknob. Then Nyla growled. Not her playful growl. It was a deep warning growl, a sound I'd never heard from her before. She was staring into the shadows behind the half-open basement door. I looked too, and I saw him. Not the man from earlier, but someone else crouching quietly in the dark hallway behind the kitchen. He wasn't moving, just waiting. For me to turn my back. I didn't hesitate. I yanked Nyla and ran out the front door as fast as I could. I didn't say anything to my parents that night. I couldn't. I was ashamed at how easily I'd been tricked, and too afraid to explain the face I saw hiding in the shadows. But one thing I know for certain, if I had gone down that basement staircase, I would not be here to tell you this story. We often tell ourselves I'll be fine. That kind of thing could never happen to me. But the people in this video once thought the same. If you enjoy true horror stories, leave a like, hit subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. And remember, the scariest thing isn't the darkness itself, it's what's quietly standing inside it.